Carlos Castaneda's The Teachings of Don Juan, A Yaqui Way of Knowledge. Part 1, The Teachings, Chapter 8. My last encounter with Mescalito was a cluster of 4 sessions which took place within 4 consecutive days. Don Juan called this long session a mitote. It was a peyote ceremony for peyoteros and apprentices. There were 2 older men, about Don Juan's age, one of whom was the leader, and 5 younger men, including myself. The ceremony took place in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico, near the Texas border. It consisted of singing and of ingesting peyote during the night. In the daytime, women attendants who stayed outside the confines of the ceremony site supplied each man with water, and only a token of ritual food was consumed each day. Saturday, September 12, 1964. During the first night of the ceremony, Thursday, September 3rd, I took 8 peyote buttons. They had no effect on me, or if they did, it was a very slight one. I kept my eyes closed most of the night. I felt much better that way. I did not fall asleep, nor was I tired. At the very end of the session, the singing became extraordinary. For a brief moment, I felt uplifted and wanted to weep, but as the song ended, the feeling vanished. We all got up and went outside. The women gave us water. Some of the men gargled it. Others drank it. The men did not talk at all, but the women chatted and giggled all day long. The ritual food was served at midday. It was cooked corn. At sundown on Friday, September 4th, the second session began. The leader sang his peyote song, and the circle of songs and intake of peyote buttons began once again. It ended in the morning with each man singing his own song in unison with the others. When I went out, I did not see as many women as had been there the day before. Someone gave me water, but I was no longer concerned with my surroundings. I had ingested 8 buttons again, but the effect had been different. It must have been toward the end of the session that the singing was greatly accelerated, and everybody singing at once. I perceived that something or somebody outside the house wanted to come in. I couldn't tell whether the singing was done to prevent it from bursting in or to lure it inside. I was the only one who did not have a song. They all seemed to look at me questioningly, especially the young men. I grew embarrassed and closed my eyes. Then I realized I could perceive what was going on much better if I kept my eyes closed. This idea held my undivided attention. I closed my eyes and saw the men in front of me. I opened my eyes and the image was unchanged. The surroundings were exactly the same for me, whether my eyes were open or closed. Suddenly, everything vanished and crumbled, and there emerged in its place the man-like figure of Mescalito I had seen 2 years before. He was sitting some distance away with his profile toward me. I stared fixedly at him, but he did not look at me. Not once did he turn. I believed I was doing something wrong, something that kept him away. I got up and walked toward him to ask him about it, but the act of moving dispelled the image. It began to fade, and the figures of the men I was with were superimposed upon it. Again, I heard the loud, frantic singing. I went into the nearby bushes and walked for a while. Everything stood out very clearly. I noticed that I was seeing in the darkness, but it mattered very little this time. The important point was, why did Mescalito avoid me? I returned to join the group, and as I was about to enter the house, I heard a heavy rumbling and felt the tremor. The ground shook, It was the same noise I had heard in the Peyote Valley 2 years before. I ran into the bushes again. I knew that Mescalito was there and I was going to find him. But he was not there. I waited until the morning and joined the others just before the session ended. The usual procedure was repeated on the third day. I was not tired, but I slept during the afternoon. In the evening of Saturday, September 5th, the old man sang his peyote song to start the cycle once more. During this session, I chewed only one button and did not listen to any of the songs, nor did I pay attention to anything that went on. From the first moment, my whole being was uniquely concentrated on one point. I knew something terribly important for my well-being was missing. While the men sang, I asked Mescalito in a loud voice to teach me a song. My pleading mingled with the men's loud singing. Immediately, I heard a song in my ears. I turned around and sat with my back to the group and listened. I heard the words and the time and the tune over and over, and I repeated them until I learned the whole song. It was a long song in Spanish. Then I sang it to the group several times, and soon afterward, a new song came to my ears. By morning, I had sung both songs countless times. I felt I had been renewed, fortified. After the water was given to us, Don Juan gave me a bag, and we all went into the hills. It was a long, strenuous walk to a low mesa. There I saw several peyote plants, but for some reason I did not want to look at them. After we had crossed the mesa, the group broke up. Don Juan and I walked back, collecting peyote buttons, just as we had done the first time I had helped him. We returned in the late afternoon of Sunday, September 6th. In the evening, the leader opened the cycle again. Nobody had said a word, but I knew perfectly well that it was the last gathering. This time, the old man sang a new song. A sack with fresh peyote buttons was passed around. This was the first time I had tasted a fresh button. It was pulpy, but hard to chew. It resembled the hard, green fruit and was sharper and more bitter than the dried buttons. Personally, I found the fresh peyote infinitely more alive. I chewed 14 buttons. I counted them carefully. I did not finish the last one, for I heard the familiar rumble that marked the presence of Mescalito. Everybody sang frantically, and I knew that Don Juan and everybody else had actually heard the noise. I refused to think that their reaction was a response to a cue given by one of them merely to deceive me. At that moment, I felt a great surge of wisdom engulfing me. A conjecture I had played with for 3 years turned into a certainty. It had taken me 3 years to realize, or rather to find out, that whatever is contained in the cactus, I'm going to try the name, but Lophora willamessa, I don't know if I said the end of it right, had nothing to do with me in order to exist as an entity. It existed by itself out there, at large. I knew it then. I sang feverishly until I could no longer voice the words. I felt as if my songs were inside my body, shaking me uncontrollably. I needed to go out and find Mescalito, or I would explode. I walked toward the peyote field. I kept on singing my songs. I knew they were individually mine, the unquestionable proof of my singleness. I sensed each one of my steps. They resounded on the ground. Their echo produced the indescribable euphoria of being a man. Each one of the peyote plants on the field shone with a bluish, scintillating light. One plant had a very bright light. I sat in front of it and sang my songs to it. As I sang, Mescalito came out of the plant. the same man-like figure I had seen before. He looked at me with great audacity. For a person of my temperament, I sang to him. There was a sound of flutes or of wind, a familiar musical vibration. He seemed to have said, as he had 2 years before, "What do you want?" I spoke very loudly. I said that I knew there was something amiss in my life and in my actions, but I could not find out what it was. I begged him to tell me what was wrong with me, and also tell me his name, so that I could call him when I needed him. He looked at me, elongated his mouth like a trumpet until it reached my ear. Then he told me his name. Suddenly I saw my own father standing in the middle of the peyote field. But the field had vanished, and the scene was my old home, the home of my childhood. My father and I were standing by a fig tree. I embraced my father and hurriedly began to tell him things I had never before been able to say. Every one of my thoughts was concise and to the point. It was as if I had no time, really, and I had to say everything at once. I said staggering things about my feelings toward him, things I would never have been able to voice under ordinary circumstances. My father did not speak. He just listened, and then was pulled or sucked away. I was alone again. I wept with remorse and sadness. I walked through the peyote field calling the name Mescalito had taught me. Something emerged from a strange star-like light on a peyote plant. It was a long, shiny object, a stick of light the size of a man. For a moment, it illuminated the whole field with an intense yellowish or amber light. Then it lit up the whole sky above, creating a portentous, marvelous sight. I thought I would go blind if I kept on looking. I covered my eyes and buried my head in my arms. I had a clear notion that Mescalito told me to eat one more peyote button. I thought, I can't do that because I have no knife to cut it. Eat one from the ground, he said to me, in the same strange way. I lay on my stomach and chewed the top of a plant. It kindled me. It filled every corner of my body with warmth and directness. Everything was alive. Everything had exquisite and intricate detail, and yet everything was so simple. I was everywhere. I could see up and down and around, all at the same time. This particular feeling lasted long enough for me to become aware of it. Then it changed into an oppressive terror. Terror that did not come upon me abruptly, but somehow swiftly. At first, my marvelous world of silence was jolted by sharp noises, but I was not concerned. Then the noises became louder and were uninterrupted, as if they were closing in on me. And gradually, I lost the feeling of floating in a world undifferentiated, indifferent, and beautiful. The noise became gigantic. The noise became gigantic steps. Something enormous was breathing and moving around me. I believed it was hunting me. I ran and hid under a boulder and tried to determine from there what was following me. At one moment I crept out of my hiding place to look, and whoever was my pursuer came upon me. It was like sea kelp. It threw itself on me. I thought its weight was going to crush me, but I found myself inside a pipe or a cavity. I clearly saw that the kelp had not covered all the ground surface around me. There remained a bit of free ground underneath the boulder. I began to crawl underneath it. I saw huge drops of liquid falling from the kelp. I knew it was secreting a digestive acid in order to dissolve me. A drop fell on my arms. I tried to rub off the acid with dirt and applied saliva to it as I kept on digging. At one point, I was almost vaporous. I was being pushed toward a light. I thought the kelp had dissolved me. I vaguely detected a light which grew brighter. It was pushing from under the ground until finally it erupted into what I recognized as the sun coming out from behind the mountains. Slowly, I began to regain my usual sensorial process. I lay on my stomach with my chin on my folded arm. The peyote plant in front of me began to light up again, and before I could move my eyes, the long light emerged again. It hovered over me. I sat up. The light touched my whole body with quiet strength and then rolled away out of sight. I ran all the way to the place where the other men were. We all returned to town. Don Juan and I stayed one more day with Don Roberto, the peyote leader. I slept all the time we were there. When we were about to leave, the young men who had taken part in the peyote sessions came up to me. They embraced me one by one and laughed shyly. Each one of them introduced himself. I talked with them for hours about everything except the peyote meetings. Don Juan said it was time to leave. The young men embraced me again. "Come back," one of them said. "We are already waiting for you," another one added. I drove away slowly, trying to see the older men, but none of them were there. Thursday, September 10th, 1964. To tell Don Juan about the experience always forced me to recall it step by step. To the best of my ability, this seemed to be the only way to remember everything. Today I told him the details of my last encounter with Mescalito. He listened to my story attentively, up to the point where Mescalito told me his name. Don Juan interrupted me there. "You are now on your own," he said. "The Protector has accepted you. I will be of very little help to you from now on. You don't have to tell me anything more about your relationship with him. You know his name now, and neither his name nor his dealings with you should ever be mentioned to a living being." I insisted that I wanted to tell him all the details of the experience because it made no sense to me. I told him I needed his assistance to interpret what had been seen. He said I could do that by myself, that it was better for me to start thinking on my own. I argued that I was interested in hearing his opinions because it would take me too long to arrive at my own, and I did not know how to proceed. I said, "Take the songs, for instance. What do they mean?" "Only you can decide that," he said. "How could I know what they mean? The Protector alone can tell you that, just as he alone can teach you his songs. If I were to tell you what they mean, it would be the same as if you learned someone else's songs." "What do you mean by that, Don Juan?" "You can tell who are the phonies by listening to people singing the Protector's songs. Only the songs with soul are his and were taught by him. The others are copies of other men's songs. People are sometimes deceitful as that. They sing someone else's song without even knowing what the songs say." I said that I had meant to ask for what purpose the songs were used. He answered me that the songs I had learned were for calling the Protector, and that I should always use them in conjunction with his name to call him. Later, Mescalito would probably teach me other songs for other purposes, Don Juan said. I asked him if he thought the Protector had accepted me fully. He laughed as if my question were foolish. He said the Protector had accepted me and had made sure I knew that he had accepted me by showing himself to me as a light twice. Don Juan seemed to be very impressed by the fact that I had seen the light twice. He emphasized that aspect of my encounter with Mescalito. I told him I could not understand how it was possible to be accepted by the Protector, yet terrified by him at the same time. He did not answer. For a very long time he seemed to be bewildered. Finally he said, "It is so clear. What he wanted is so clear that I don't see how you can misunderstand. Everything is still incomprehensible to me, Don Juan. It takes time to really see and understand what Mescalito means. You should think about his lessons until they become clear." Friday, September 11th, 1964. Again, I insisted upon having Don Juan interpret my visionary experiences. He stalled for a while. Then he spoke as if he had already been carrying on a conversation about Mescalito. "Do you see how stupid it is to ask if he is like a person you can talk to?" Don Juan said. "He is like nothing you have ever seen. He is like a man, but at the same time, he is not at all like one. It is difficult to explain that to people who know nothing about him and want to know everything about him all at once. And then, his lessons are as mysterious as he is himself. No man, to my knowledge, can predict his acts. You ask him a question, and then he shows you the way. But he does not tell you about it in the same manner you and I talk to each other. Do you understand now what he does? I don't think I have trouble understanding that. What I can't figure out is his meaning. You asked me to tell you what's wrong with you, and you asked him to tell you what was wrong with you, and he gave you the full picture. There can be no mistake. You can't claim you did not understand. It was not a conversation, and yet it was. Then you asked him another question, and he answered you in exactly the same manner. As to what he meant, I am not sure I understand it, because you chose not to tell me what your question was. I repeated very carefully the questions I remembered having asked. I put them in the order in which I had voiced them. Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? What should I do with my life? Don Juan said the questions I had asked were only words. It was better not to voice the question, but to ask them from within. He told me the protector meant to give me a lesson, and to prove that he meant to give me a lesson and not to scare me away, he showed himself as a light twice. I said I could not understand why Mescalito terrorized me if he had accepted me. I reminded Don Juan that, according to his statements, to be accepted by Mescalito implied that his form was constant and did not shift from bliss to nightmare. Don Juan laughed at me again and said that if I would think about the question I had in my heart when I talked to Mescalito, then I myself would understand the lesson. To think about the question I had in my heart was a difficult problem. I told Don Juan I had many things in mind. When I asked if I was on the right path, I meant, do I have one foot in each of two worlds? Which world is the right one? What course should my life take? Don Juan listened to my explanations and concluded that I did not have a clear view of the world and that the protector had given me a beautifully clear lesson. He said, "You think there are two worlds for you, two paths, but there is only one. The protector showed you this with unbelievable clarity. The only world available to you is the world of men. In that world, you cannot choose to leave. You are a man. The protector showed you the world of happiness, where there is no difference between things, because there is no one there to ask about the difference. But that is not the world of men. The protector shook you out of it and showed you how a man thinks and fights. That is the world of man. to be a man is to be condemned to that world. You have the vanity to believe you live in two worlds. But that is only your vanity. There is but one single world for us. We are men, and we must follow the world of men contentedly. I believe that was the lesson. End of chapter.